Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a weekly podcast where we try and figure out how to be better people through actual actions. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
This week we're talking about how to admit when you're wrong.
I'm never wrong.
Me neither. So we might not be the best people for the job.
But we'll certainly have a think about it. The hypothetical scenario when we're wrong.
We'll try and think about when we heard someone else admitting that they were wrong and how impressed we were. We will talk about the lengths to which people's cognitive dissonance can go when they're wrong, like when the idea that they can't be wrong comes into conflict with a directly observable fact. We'll just try and figure out what does it take to swallow your pride and just go, oh, yeah, okay.
And maybe why does it matter?
And why does it matter? Yeah. And why it's just systematically, our politics is built on people refusing to ever admit that they're wrong to the point of absolute absurdity. So that's what we're talking about.
But before we do that, we've had Christmas.
We've just had Christmas. Sorry that we didn't wish you Merry Christmas on when the episode came out on Christmas Day. We just didn't think, we forgot. So here's a belated Merry Christmas for last week. And a Happy New Year, I guess.
Yeah, Happy New Year. This one comes out on New Year's Day, doesn't it?
I guess so.
So we need to say Happy 2019 to all of us.
Happy, and I hope your hangovers dissipate soon.
And that the news is better.
Well, I mean, this year is the year of March the 29th or whatever. Brexit's happening, presumably. So we've got that to look forward to. But also new season of Game of Thrones. So, good. It's good and bad. How's it going?
How's it going with me?
Yeah.
I made lemon marmalade. I did call it lemon jam, and you pointed out that it was marmalade.
I said, shouldn't it be marmalade?
So I looked in the book, and it is indeed called lemon and vanilla marmalade. It was delicious. And I've been running again. I've been running.
Yeah.
Yes. And I've been paddleboarding. Yes. And I haven't fallen in the sea yet. Yes. And but I have been paddleboarding.
Are you sort of in the sea? Aren't you kind of in the sea? Or are you sitting atop a thing?
Or you're standing on top of a thing that floats atop the sea. And how are you, Michael? How are you doing?
It's been ups and downs. Christmas is always a bit of a challenge with the family. But also just before Christmas, Sharon's been away and I didn't really know what to watch. And I came across I'd heard about The Haunting of Hill House on, through Red Letter Media. But it's sort of like one of these, it's a TV series, but it's not the normal sort of, it's more of a novel. It's sort of like an 8-hour film more than a sort of TV series. So basically I just watched this 8-10 hour horror film on my own. But also one of the reasons I wanted to keep watching it was because I think I've talked about, I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast, but I've had this thing where, my screenplay writing book that I was talking about like earlier in the year, so, something related to that where I sort of wanted to tell my story of my sort of early years. I just felt like there was nothing really in fiction that I could really point to. But then the more I thought about what that story would have to be, the more I realised it would have to be a horror film, really, to work. Like, you make the stuff that was in someone's head real to tell the story. And then I was watching this and it was like, it was kind of close to the story that I would have had to do. So I was like, well, I'm just going to watch all of this so that I can get through it. But then, it was just like, I had to keep the podcasts on, keep the sounds going to get to sleep.
Really?
Because there's a lot of like creepy stuff. Like you look, suddenly a hallway is like, I just don't like that. Looking down that hallway, I don't like. And you're just kind of like, you shut your eyes and you're sort of thinking about all this creepy imagery that's in there. But I did, I kind of wrote a post up on the internet where I drew all the parallels between my experience and what was in there, and had actually a lot of engagement with that post. So it was on a thing about the TV show, But I said, look, here's what it got, because it was really about the characters as much as the horror, really, and how having fucked up stuff happen to you as a child, how their lives, turn out later. So it was very interesting from that. But then I kind of got a few people then sort of going up, telling their story and sort of going, I don't feel alone having seen that you've just sort of shared this. And a lot of people sort of grateful that I'd sort of been brave enough to sort of share this story. But it just meant then, as I was going home, I kept being reminded and seeing all these other really upsetting stories just coming into notifications on my phone for like 2 days. And my conclusion, so I'm like living in this haunted thing, I'm reliving childhood experiences. I'm suddenly getting all this other stuff about drug addiction, schizophrenia, like being your mother being a danger, or your father being like a danger to your life, and all this stuff kind of coming through to my phone. And it took a bit of a toll, I have to say, just like emotionally. And it made me, but my conclusion from it is, because the idea was, I said, I write this not so much as a cathartic thing, but it was more like, okay, if I watch this, then it becomes a touchstone by which I can talk about the most damaging experience of my life. And as such, perhaps I'll find a connection to a world I've always felt has failed to understand me. But my conclusion from doing that is trauma is a really bad bedrock to make a connection with another person. Right? Because you don't want to go back to it all the time. And if you build a relationship on the worst thing that's ever happened to you, that's not a foundation for something that thrives in the future. That's like if you sort of do get annoyed with someone, or if you're not sure, or if it's just like, oh yeah, but don't forget why we're together. Oh, I don't want to think about that anymore. Like, there is a certain act. Going back to the trauma is not, it's helpful once in a while, but it's not something you want to be the foundation for something. Anyway, I've talked for ages on that.
No. It's making me, I think it's interesting. Well, it's more than interesting. It's a bit of a gut punch, your story.
Yeah.
That's all right. But I think you think about, that's quite a lot to invite into your life.
Oh, yeah. No, I always like, why am I... Yeah. I don't even like horror films.
Well, yeah, I don't watch any horror ever. And I think I personally don't watch any horror ever because I've got real stories of horror, and so I don't want made up somebody else's images of horror. It's like, for me, reading a story is always more scary than watching a movie as well, because then I make it my version of scary, so I plug into my own scariest things. But I think inviting other people's trauma into your life is a very difficult thing to do, and if you're not, it is a job for professionals. And so, that's why I think mental health nurses are like the most stressed of all nurses, because they're constantly dealing with other people's mental health.
It's rough.
It's very rough.
And I wouldn't have done it unless I felt strong. It's a shame that I had to do it while Sharon was away, because I needed to watch something that she wouldn't want to watch.
Yeah.
There was something else that I wanted to watch, but I was like, she'll enjoy this too much. I can't watch it on my own. I'm going to wait.
Right.
I guess I'm watching the horror thing. Oh, God, why am I doing this?
Nick likes watching horror, and he knows to watch them when I'm not there, so that's all cool. So we don't have the same problem as you. But the thing about building a relationship on something that's traumatic is, I think I'd never articulated that, but it makes perfect sense, because if you're building a relationship around something either practical or happy or joyful, you've always got that joy to go back to. Yeah. Instead of going back to something miserable. I did have an interesting conversation when I was travelling through the capital to go to my cousin's to pick up my paper, and he's only 8 years younger than my late father. So we sat down and we had this big conversation, but we talked about the fact that all of our family, there is lots of trauma in our family. And we talked about the fact that trauma, each of us, he talked about, we ended up talking about the purpose of life, and it's one of those late evening conversations with no alcohol. we just sat there talking about the purpose of life, and the purpose of life being, in his view, to sort of constantly work on and discover yourself and understand yourself fully. But we talked about that in the context of trauma and how these traumatic events are catalysts for self-discovery. You can't, people who have experienced trauma really end up being shoved into self-discovery because you've got no choice in order to come out of it. So he was viewing them as yes, they're horrible, but they've probably done us all some, like in that sort of optimistic viewing back, they've done us all a favour. But
I guess I wouldn't have it any other way. Should I admit that I was wrong to tell that story?
No, you were not wrong.
Okay. So let's talk about how to admit when we're wrong. Have you done it?
Yes, I have. I have.
Okay.
My name's Ivanka, and I have admitted that I am wrong.
What did it take?
But probably. So I was thinking. I was trying to think of specific examples, and I can't right now.
I can't either. I'm just like, what have I ever? Because you sort of.
But I do know that I have these conversations with Nick. I think it's important in my marriage for both of us, our ability to go, yeah, I know I thought that, but I was wrong. And now that I know, and it's probably said in that tone, look, I'm sorry, but I was wrong. I thought that this was true, but it was not true, and now I'm wrong. So it might be something like I had this idea for the day, and I totally messed up everyone's day because I thought that this was happening and it isn't, or whatever. Yeah. Or that the child would enjoy this, but she didn't, or I don't know, whatever it might be. So I definitely use the phrase, I know I thought that, and I know I said that, but I was wrong.
I think the most often it happens is when something's happening in my relationship where, like, I know myself well enough that I think it's while it's happening, I'm simultaneously reacting to a thing, but also at the same time saying, look, I know I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. But I'm still upset until I kind of have to work through this until I internalize the fact that I know that I'm wrong to have jumped to this conclusion. I know it intellectually. From experience, this has happened so many times, but you're still going to feel bad for a while I treat you as though I believe it, So I think that's the most common occurrence of it for now. It's like, I'm sorry, I know I'm wrong. Like I say it angrily, like I know I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But there's that sort of like all or nothingness sometimes of if you have to admit that you're wrong about one thing, it's sort of like that's admitting that you're just a bad person. I think when you're sort of under pressure or not feeling so great, and I think that's the sort of fear with admitting you're wrong. It's like, okay, well, if I'm wrong about that, then I'm just a bad person or I'm just a wrong person.
There's something about having a wrong, quote unquote, emotional reaction to something is very difficult, because when we talked about the title of this episode, I wasn't really thinking about like incorrect emotional responses. Like, because really emotions can't be wrong. They are how you feel. There's really not a lot you can do about it. As you grow older, or you become more self-aware, or you work on yourself, or whatever it is, you may learn that reaction is not necessarily a positive one, and you may be able to work on yourself to have a different positive reaction, blah, blah, blah. So I don't think about that in terms of wrong. I think you can think of it, I personally, well, I won't tell you, this is where I refer to my therapy. I think about the fact that the way I react to something is not doing me any favours, that it's something I can change, but the other person can't change. So that kind of like, whatever happens, all you can ever change in your life is your own reaction to something. And I definitely am far from good at this. I can watch myself be a mentalist. That's probably a bad word to use, but I can watch myself react to something. Oh, you just don't. It's not necessarily. It's a waste of energy. It's not doing anything positive. What are you doing? And it's like, I need to take a deep breath. But then if I lose this reaction to things, is this changing who I am fundamentally? If I'm not the person that loses their temper over this type of stuff, am I then a different person? I have all this kind of crazy thought processes.
So often admitting you're wrong is admitting to, once you start connecting it to belief, there's quite a lot at stake. There's quite a lot of your identity at stake sometimes if you sort of have a belief and then you've been accumulating evidence that supports that belief. Let's say you believe in ghosts. Right. And then now you're sort of looking around, you're kind of seeing evidence for ghosts, and something that you can't quite explain is suddenly evidence for that. And I will give you specific examples. After I just finished watching that horror TV series, I was like, I'm just going to go and have a nice warm bath. And then I had this whole thing. I was sort of having lit a couple of candles, turn the lights off, have the iPad so I can watch something, and then the Wi-Fi starts going out, and I'm like, what's happening? And then it's going, this is the wrong Wi-Fi password, and you start to get that kind of horror kind of reaction to it. But then it's like, it's okay, Michael. There's nothing magic happening. No one's broken into your house and changed your Wi-Fi password. And then above me, this candle just explodes and falls onto my shoulder, like hot wax on my shoulder, and I'm like getting this wax off. I'm going, fuck, I did not want to have a haunted bath right now. And it was my own fault because I'd left it was like the last of a candle, but I'd left a really long kind of match, and it was one of those ones where it's like the flame is all big because you've got the thing all wonky in it. So I knew why. It was perfectly rational, but I was like, you can see how people can get into that superstitious mindset so easily. It doesn't take much to start seeing evidence everywhere that you're like, literally, the next thing I did after watching this horror film, there was evidence everywhere for sort of supernatural activity. I really had to be like, Michael,
have a word with yourself.
Do not entertain this. It's funny. Don't be scared. But you know what I mean? It's like, there's that confirmation bias, for example, that can really leave you with a lot of evidence towards a belief that then it gets harder and harder to admit that you're wrong, that maybe ghosts don't exist, maybe my house isn't haunted,
Listen, baby, seriously, you're gonna have to really talk to me. And when I take this off, you promise not to scream. Free.
bringing this back to the emotions and right or wrong emotion reaction things, is that I also think in this world where, because we're talking about this in the context of the world now, so somebody who voted a particular way, we believe that they're wrong, and I do this, it's like they go, oh, but they're worried about immigrants. Like, well, there are no immigrants where they are. Why are they worried? That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous worry. It's ridiculous that they should be having that emotional reaction to immigrants. When, I'm not giving their emotions the same respect I give my own, which is like just to dismiss them. I think where I am most often most wrong is being dismissive of other adults' emotional reactions to things. Other adults is.
Yeah, well, I had a lot of being told my emotional reactions to things were wrong.
But it doesn't help at all.
But it doesn't, it's not the point.
No.
It doesn't make it any less true.
So it's like, oh, don't be ridiculous. You shouldn't be afraid of this. That is just silly. It's like you can't deal with emotions in that way. So I think there's that sort of wrongness. There's the emotional, the sort of the wrongness or rightness of an emotional reaction to a thing. That is an area we could probably talk about for an hour easily. There is also what you said about in the intro, which was this sort of world where we live in, where being right is so important that there is no room anymore to admit you're wrong, which is a total undermining of the idea of learning, in my view.
Yeah.
It's like, and I was reading on a silly little tangential note, I was reading Pinocchio the other day with my daughter. The sort of the pop culture thing that Pinocchio has given us is long noses for liars. Yeah. But whereas the donkey ears for people who don't go to school and don't learn has been totally lost. And actually, I think there's quite a few people wandering around now with donkey ears, just sort of completely ignoring the sort of value of learning things. I was talking to Claire Farrell from the Extinction Rebellion gang, and we were talking about, so the Extinction Rebellion has its principles, but it doesn't necessarily, and I was talking to her about the fact that one of the problems that came out of the, I don't even know how you say it, this latest climate gathering in Poland, was one of the big topics there was that still so many Polish people make money as coal miners. And until we have an answer for what those people are to do for a living, if we close all the coal mines, then, it's very difficult to talk to them about the keeping coal in the ground as a way of preventing climate collapse. And she's like, yeah, but, we don't have the answers to that. I don't have to have all these. She was like, should we have all the answers to that? What is wrong with saying that, no, we don't know. We don't know the best answer to that, but we need to be having a conversation about it. Standing up and just being yet another sort of arrogant political type who claims to have the answers to every question isn't going to help. And I think that's a sort of an I think this idea of being right all the time is, you've correctly identified or highlighted the fact that that's a big problem with modern times.
One of my mentees at the Think Nation thing described like the House of Commons as just having like rap battles. They'll just sort of say stuff, rap battles. It'll be like, blah, 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 boom. And then the other one will be like, blah, 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 boom. And they're not listening to each other. No one's changing their mind. No one's doing anything. It's just like, I'm saying my thing now.
Yeah.
No one can ever... It's just completely meaningless.
Yeah. I like it. It'd be more fun if it was rap battles.
If they had to rhyme as well.
This idea that a decision you make once is right forever. It's the same. We spoke about it last week in the subject of hiring people. When we talked about the fact that we got it wrong, we hired the wrong person, and you have to admit that to yourself. That's hard as well. We followed a process. I've always been hiring people. I think is really, really hard. But the sooner you can establish that you are not right for each other, the better for everybody, the least stress for everybody. And I think in a work context, often you've spent thousands of pounds hiring somebody.
Yeah, so, and you're going to have to admit to someone else, your superiors, that you were wrong.
Yeah.
And that's going to go on your record,
whatever. Or whatever, and it's really, you've got to be praying for a boss who has previously made a poor decision and admitted it to themselves.
Yeah.
That can take you going up and going, you know, that thing I did, I was wrong. It was wrong. I made a mistake. What can we do now? How do we unfuck it? There can be no progress without accepting error.
If you were to just only, like, the way Donald Trump can't even admit that he misspoke halfway through a sentence. He'll say completely the wrong word, but you just see it sort of as he's speaking. He'll kind of misread something and then just double down on it. And it's just absolute nuts, that kind of mentality.
Well, it's that whole, if I keep, you know, I'm going to keep repeating this until it becomes true.
It's like jazz. It's like improvisation. If you play a wrong note, you then have to repeat the wrong note so that everyone thinks it was the thing you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Not to throw him under the bus, but I did see my dad do a real, like, habitual, can't admit a mistake yesterday when it was like, he went to my stepmom, like, he like held up some wrapping paper and sort of went, this needs to go upstairs. And she went, I'm not taking that upstairs for you. And he went, I wasn't asking you to take it upstairs. And I was like, I mean, you blatantly were asking her to take it upstairs. I mean, I mean, that was quite a black and white, I'm sorry. Force of habit, admit vulnerability, admit a mistake, but just reflexive denial of reality just from on such a small thing. It was so it's tough when you're in the habit as well. But what is it? What is that shell that it gives you to never be wrong? What does Trump and my dad have? What do they get from that? I'm sorry. My dad ever, I'm so sorry. I was with tongue in cheek. I showed my stepmom how to sort of sort out the podcast on her phone properly yesterday. So there's a chance
she's going to hear. She's going to listen.
I say I do this with love, but I did just compare you to Trump. I'm very sorry.
I don't know. What is it? I don't know. Ego? Confidence?
It's power. There's a power that comes with. Oh, I mean, the Pope is infallible. Yeah. You know, is it power or is it insecurity or is it? It's just a coping mechanism.
Yeah,
I'm not going to deal with. I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to change because I've got something that works, and I'm not willing to adjust it because it's kind of getting me through the day.
I think it's the feeling of, you know, on the subject of feelings, the feeling of being wrong or making a mistake isn't nice.
Sucks.
And it really, I mean, this week I went to a supermarket with my, 3-year-old daughter, and she was playing with a bag of sugar that that was supposed to be in the trolley. And I was like, be careful with that. Don't drop it. Anyway, she threw it a few times and eventually the bag split open and it spilled sugar all over the floor. And I said, well, we're going to have to go and find somebody now to help sweep it up. And she went, don't tell them I was naughty. Because it's not. She's just like, don't tell them. I didn't either say she was naughty or not. I said, let's go and find somebody who can help us clean it up. So I went and cleaned it up. And then the lady said not to worry. She'd dropped bags before and... obviously this is the first time it ever happened, so she had no idea of, it doesn't matter how many times you tell a small child that if you keep throwing that on the floor, it's going to break. Is it? Let me investigate this theory of yours, Mother.
Sometimes you can't be told. There's a lot of things. I think I'm just bad at being told stuff. I kind of have to try it. I think a lot of us, we have to try it, experience it for ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's 100% true. Some of us are better than others. There's like, look, I'm not telling you this because I don't love you. I'm telling you this because it saves you a lot of bother if you just believe me when I tell you that bag of sugar is going to smash all over the floor if you keep throwing it. Everyone wants to feel confident and happy, don't they? That they know what they're doing, that these are some sort of ideas that we all strive towards.
Well, you have your sort of apparatus, you have your sort of mech suit that you walk through the world in. That's how I'm going to visualize it. Which I think I sort of backlash against that. I don't want to have to wear a mask of kind of hiding behind something when I deal with the world. I just want to be who I am. But then I think that's a very exhausting way to live when you kind of talk to a lot of different people. When you don't have the suit, when you don't have the sort of facade going, it's just, I think it's more difficult. So then you protect the facade.
Yes, I think the facade is an important thing. That's sort of like who you choose to present yourself as during a day, or what you're trying to do thing, is the bit that takes time to construct and effort to maintain.
And the reason that this keys in is because you can't show any. You have your doubts. You have your things that don't quite add up, but you sort of remove those from the facade. The facade, it knows. The confident you knows all the answers to all of those questions, even if you might privately not be quite sure anymore. What
you've really made me think I will join up is that, we've had these conversations before now where when I take on some sort of project that I really want to see through, I will push through to the point of being covered in hives, crying to and from work, just generally not functioning anymore as a physical human being, but maintaining the job. The job must be delivered. I was talking with my cousin about this on my evening of philosophical Maich chats, and he was talking about the fact that, in those sorts of circumstances, he decided that we had a sort of DNA defect because we're like my grandfather, and that we all have a bit of this like must work, must deliver, must finish. But it was like, to what end? So it's kind of a slightly different variation on being wrong. It's like, how much is it costing you to maintain the idea that you're right?
Yeah, and it's quite
when
incredible the lengths people will go to. Yeah, you've got to look at the energy in, energy out. Like,
it's like you are maintaining this idea that this project can be delivered in the way that you've envisioned it or set out to do it. But how much is it costing you physically to do that?
Yeah, like I can do this, I can make this happen. You have to cement that belief, and then, admitting that you couldn't is the same feeling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, we were talking about the fact that for me to leave Canonical, my mother and husband almost staged an intervention. It's like, no.
So what was it that actually helped you do it on your own and not have to have the intervention?
I remember at the time having 3 reasons. But the one that has stuck with me is the fact that when we got the Ubuntu phone to the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, one of the biggest electronics shows in the world, immediately followed by Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, 2 major launch pads. And we were ready. We did it. It was my approach. I 100% take it. But I came up with the idea of using 3 main user stories that we would drive all delivery to. So we used agile techniques, epics, blah, blah, blah. There were 200 of us, engineers. We ran agile. We ran, developers talking to designers, nobody being blah, 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 blah. And we did that, and everyone was delighted. And then as soon as we delivered it, Canonical wanted to revert to the previous model of delivery of software.
Okay.
I was like, I've been trying to do that for 4 years. It's nearly fucking killed me. I've just delivered a mobile phone demo, not on my own, with engineering leads, with everybody. We've just done this in 8 weeks. It's almost impossible. And you're going to just hand over all that to a VP of engineering. Oh, fuck that shit. I was like, I don't know what else I need to do to prove that this way works better. So, so that was really, I was like, I can't do anything.
It's like you need that proof. You need to be convinced.
Yeah, I just, nothing could say, because it was like everybody was praising me. Yep, you delivered this. You stood up to, even things like up front, right, we're going to agree now what hardware we're doing these demos on. We're going to, I drove to all the decisions that made it happen. Everybody knew that was true.
Yeah.
And yet they were all looking me in the eye going, no, that's brilliant. Now we're going to hand it back to VP of engineering. So I can't. Anyway, so that was fun. There were a couple of, Yeah, you
need that irrefutable.
Yeah, it was. For me, it was irrefutable evidence that actually all along the way I'd been doing it had been wrong. When I was allowed to do it in a way that I thought was right, I could prove that it was right. There was nothing left to discuss. It is irrefutable proof. It was that. For me, data. I mean, I think I'd be a funny user researcher if I didn't believe in data. But there is that point where you go, like the evidence I have before me suggests that we can't do this again because it's wrong. And I was wrong to let it go on for as long as I did.
Let me tell you about, I'll try and keep it brief, but I'll tell you about how I, as a teenager, admitted that God didn't exist and that the soul is not a kind of magical thing that exists outside the physical body, right?
Wow, profoundness.
Yeah. So I was raised a Catholic, and there was a lot riding on that. Like, if I'm ever going to see Mummy again, I've got to be a good boy so that I can go to heaven where she is. There was all that. Like, it was really like deeply ingrained in there. So I embraced it wholeheartedly. And I did find it a bit weird that, like, I was a Catholic, but then it was like, oh, well, we'll go to this Baptist church, and then when we move house, we'll go to this Methodist. I'm like, well, shouldn't I be going to a Catholic church? But then it was very hard to get my dad to come with me to a Catholic church, surprisingly enough. But anyway, so I read the Bible every day. We got given this Gideon Bible at school, and I used to read that every day. Anything I knew, anything that anyone had told me about how to kind of do well in the eyes of God, I was trying to do. And, as I sort of reached my teens, what finally swung me was reading some stuff. I've mentioned it before, Great Mambo Chicken and the transhuman condition, reading all this stuff about the transhuman condition and starting to see people talking about, because there's this eternal life thing. And they make you recite it as well. Like, I went to this sort of Scouts type thing, but a bit more religious when I was younger. And you had to, like, recite this line. And it's all about, if you're a good person, you'll live forever. And that's kind of like, this is why you're doing it, because you want eternal life. And the more I thought about it, I was like, well, no one ever really visualizes what that actually looks like. So no one really has answers to those questions of what heaven is supposed to be. There's an awful lot of detail about the punishment side, but very little detail about the heaven side. And then if it is about living forever, it seems like science has a pretty good idea on doing that, if as much as religion does. So I needed to sort of match the promises of religion to an alternative before I could go, okay. And then ultimately I kind of let myself switch off the religion by saying, look, well, this is a test. In 20 years, if we have artificial intelligence that is indistinguishable from a person, then that's proof enough that the soul does not exist separate from the body. And then I'll know. Whereas religion doesn't give you anything like that. It doesn't give you an experiment that you could do. It doesn't give you any. It just kind of tells you that you have to have faith, and everything is about, oh, don't be a doubting Thomas. Just like have faith in it. And I think that's feeding into this plan I've got now. It's like when you need something as big as the beliefs that you're abandoning to sort of transfer to. So you can't kind of go from a big belief to just a part of another belief. You kind of need something that matches it in size so you don't feel like you're losing everything in the process of admitting that all of this stuff you believed was not true.
To admit to yourself, or to accept, or to no longer believe that you are right or that your beliefs are right, this in-between, I think that's one of the problems of the admitting you're wrong. It's like admitting you're wrong without having a step forward
Yeah.
That in that bit, which could last 2 seconds or could last a lifetime, it's really dark.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how to move forward. I think in my personal relationship with religion, for example, I had a very superficial, childish relationship with the concept of God and the Bible and Jesus. I never had proper religious education. So therefore, they were childhood stories more than anything. So there was never a firm and around. But, you know, and for my father's death, the Catholicism bit was more, I knew that we needed to have all these rituals performed for him because he had been brought up a strict Catholic and he was terrified of not. He was fed into Catholicism by terror, and that was one thing he refused to give his children. So for me, letting go of religion or existing as this nebulous thing that floats in my head is very much philosophical rather than belief. So that's not the comparable thing to me.
Yeah.
For me,
well, it doesn't have to be about religion. It's just that,
but I think for most people, I think people can associate religion very easily with a profound existential questions.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, the areas where it takes me time to. Like at the moment, I'm trying to decide whether I should stay a member of the Labour Party. You know, that's a big thing for me because I'm like, actually, it's like, what the fuck is going on with these people?
We need our own one. We need our own new one.
Well, this is one. I think there is so much room. One of the things from what you were talking about last week, where you were talking about, you know, if you start making decisions around specific, like, how do we want education to work? Like this, fuck Labour versus Conservative, none of that. Right? How should our approach to climate change be? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, we're living in this village here in Croatia at the moment for this week where the mayor is independent of political parties. It's a very small village that in the summer has 10,000 people, in the winter 1,200. 109 children in this village, including my child. Each of them got a present from Father Christmas, quote unquote. And it wasn't some shitty pound shop thing. You know, they were age appropriate, gender neutral, a drawing board she got. That's a whiteboard on one. She's played with it every single day. It's a nice quality present. There's nothing in Croatian politics that says all these children, you know, like, that's not ideological. That's, let's give every child a present because we can. And each child will have the same present and it'll be called. We used to get that in communism.
Right.
We got them for New Year, not Christmas. And Grandfather Frost delivered them. But the same sort of thing happened then, and it's obviously something they've retained. I don't know whether it's this village or the country in general. But, you know, like, these things don't matter. So you have these... Sorry, I went off on a tangent about politics, but I think that's really important at the moment. I think, you know, where... I know you've brought up this concept at the very beginning of the podcast, she says, pointing to her left, because that's where the start is. but we talked about the fact that actually these political parties is a very... I don't think it works. No. I really don't. No. And I don't know.
You just get people that are good at politics, and you just get people that think in terms of politics,
and they do rap battles in House Commons. Yeah. And it's just like, you know, they say, or like you brought up the just before podcast, just off podcast, you brought up this, what Hillary Clinton said about refugees.
Yeah. So Hillary Clinton says that the EU leaders need to say they can't help refugees in order to quell populism. That's pure politics, isn't it?
Yeah,
in order
totally.
For the
Tell
appearance of, you know, and whether or not that's appeasement, sort of like Neville Chamberlain appeasement sort of advice there. I couldn't disagree more with her, you know.
No, well, it's also the same. It's no different really to Dominic Cummings and his whole, you don't need to worry about the real reasons I think the EU are wrong. You just worry about migrants.
Worry about the perception and the...
You know, there's just so many things at the moment that are about pretense and perception and convincing people and selling ideas and propaganda and all these words that maybe they've always been around. I don't even know or care. The point is that we are becoming, I think, as a whole, humans are becoming too educated to suck up this shit anymore. It's no longer a very small percentage of people who can read and write. most of us can read or write. Or read and write.
Read or at least one of the two.
One of the two. But it's like come on. I was listening to that Martha Lane Fox edited Today programme podcasting. I had to do the listen again later. But there's somebody written a book that I need to check out for sure. That about the fact that all these super rich who are sort of giving money to charity. In a sort of way of convincing us that they're pretending they're nice. So Mark Zuckerberg, he used as an example on the radio show, which was at the same time as basically fucking us all politically, announced that he was going to give X $billion to cure all known diseases. Right. He actually said that, apparently. And it's like, no, listeners, you did hear me. He said all diseases. And it's like, just pay your fucking taxes. And let us all decide. Pay your taxes. Decide. Let's vote. Let's decide if we want good education for all, or we want, great education for a small percentage of very rich people and shitty education for everyone else, because those are the choices. So, I think it's so in a world of, I think, again, slowly over the course of being on this podcast with you, I've learned a couple of things about myself. One is that actually the climate and women's equality or equality are my two main issues. I've refined down to that. The other thing is that I'm slowly coming to terms with, and it pains me because I can't see the next way out and how much it will cost us, is that we need some sort of new version of politics that's less full of politics. Yeah. And it's like, it's probably taken you a year to help my brain sieve this through, but I'm beginning to accept that I might be wrong about the current political structures.
Maybe it's not about rap battles. So James O'Brien, back to the subject of admitting that you're wrong. So he will. He says. I watched him on Richard Herring as well. He said the only criteria he has of who gets let through as a caller is confidence. Is if they're going to sort of mumble and not really have a point, then it's not good radio. But these people ring in, and it's amazing because they will talk around the houses about the fact that they're worried about immigrants, up until he sort of like pins them down and says, basically, it's immigrants. And they'll say the most ridiculous things when he says, well, what are the EU doing? Which law? They're like, we just want to make British law. We want British law. And he goes, well, what British law don't we have now that isn't the law? Well, it's 3-pin plugs. And he goes, well, we're in the EU and we have 3-pin plugs. And they go, and he goes, I'm sorry, but you've just gone on national radio and said, you voted leave because you want to keep 3-pin plugs, which no one has ever said anything about not having. Would you still vote leave now? Yeah, of course I would. And he'd be like, and there you have it. There's that cognitive dissonance can get taken so far, even when it's... But the thing is, with James O'Brien's way of talking to these people is it's all about being right, which is fine. Like, he will be right at people. But that obviously doesn't work to convince people in the moment, right? No. So it's kind of, maybe later they'll sort of reflect a bit more and realise, but if you just prove someone wrong to their, like, if you directly just are right at someone, it doesn't even work. It doesn't work. That's not how you change someone's mind in the moment. This wasn't supposed to start as me criticizing any criticism of James O'Brien. I think what he's doing is great, and I hope that some of the people...
I didn't hear it as a criticism.
Okay, yeah. But just actually in terms of convincing people, you can just repeat their utter contradiction back to them, and there's nowhere to go, and they still, at that moment, are incapable of changing their mind. Somebody else can't tell you you're wrong. You have to realise that you're wrong. It has to be an admission of wrongness. Yeah. It has to be a realisation of wrongness. And in order to do that, you have to be listening to yourself. Both, literally, what did I just say? And, actually
feeling the words. So it's got to be you that's doing the talking and listening, not your mech suit, your construction that you've created. You've actually got to go, hang on a minute, but...
Yeah, it has to come from inside. So then the one caller that did, like, it's just heartbreaking. The one guy that I saw that did ring in and say, look, I voted leave. I was in the military. It was just accepted that if you were patriotic, then you vote leave. I thought we'd stay in, but I just wanted to be able to say, well, I didn't vote for this. And now he's saying, look, once I admitted it, I've apologised to my son for what I've done. Right? It is a huge thing to admit, because suddenly you've got to see that you've done something awful to the people you care about. So that's the defence, that's the shield that you have to put up, because you didn't think it was a big deal. And actually a lot of stuff, crimes, mistakes, in the moment might not seem like a big deal. Oh, I'm just going to put them, fuck him, leave.
Yeah.
Might not seem like anything, because you've just not really been thinking about it, or you're just not aware of the consequences.
I wrote down consequences just before you said it. But yeah, consequences is a massive part of the realisation. Yeah,
and having to take responsibility for a mistake. And this isn't just voting leave. I just think, like, a life-changing mistake can happen in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And it might not be entirely your fault, but there's something about taking responsibility for a mistake that, I don't know, is it cruel to say that most people are incapable of?
Well, judging by current politics, our government can't take responsibility for a mistake. We are a country, an actual country, that doesn't know how it's going to function, has no plan for how it's going to function as of the 29th of March 2019, which is
it's just in denial.
Something like 96 days away or something. It's just, I don't want to think that people are incapable.
Well, if we think about that, then that's, how do we...
That's too depressing. I can't handle it.
What do we do? How do you let people be wrong and sort of keep their pride, or keep hope, not just be depressed? Because, if you just take away a belief and don't replace it with something of equal size, then everyone's just going to be fucking sad.
My latest favourite person in the world is Greta Thunberg, as we've discussed in
Greta
most episodes
Thunberg
recently. Greta, Deborah Francis White, the list goes on. But the whole Greta Thunberg Extinction Rebellion thing is about the fact that the politicians are not accepting the brokenness of the climate. And until they do, because her big thing is like, what we have now isn't working. It's doing nothing to fix the things. We need a change of structure. That's why they're doing the whole civil disobedience thing. That's why they are trying to get everything higher up on the news, trying to get people to just keeping on at it in a way that's not about going to the polls and voting. It's about, no, something needs to change today. But and she sits there, she goes, you say you love your children, they're the most precious thing in your life, and yet you're not admitting that you're severely impacting on their survival. I've also seen articles that talk about the fact that one of the reasons it isn't top headline on the news is because it would create panic. But
well,
I mean,
that's what's needed sometimes.
it's like, okay, panic probably isn't necessarily what we're after, but action certainly is. I saw this very this interesting little Twitter thread on her Twitter, because she was on CNN, and she said, first you need to get angry and then you need to take action. Because it was like, what do you tell people they should do? They should get angry and they should take action. And it's like, and then there was other people going, oh, anger is a really difficult word and it like invites violence. And it's like, like, I agree with everything you're saying, but anger is very, and it's like some sort of, ugh.
Look, here's the thing, like, we're not going to start decapitating people.
No.
We know life is in a better place than it's been. In many ways, poverty, education, all these things have been on the up for a long time. So it's much harder to revolt now in a responsible way, because you're sort of like, we're up that hierarchy a lot more, the hierarchy of needs a lot more. And it's like, how do you smash everything but without smashing the stuff that's good? How do you have a revolution that is confined to the top 3 parts of Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
But I think that's what's wrong with Brexit, is because it's not at the top 3. It's fucking the whole lot.
They don't. People are attacking the foundations for something that's actually kind of a lot higher up.
Yeah, totally. But I think that's what even if you look though at the tactics of the Extinction Rebellion, they're like, we're not, they are not about, like, the drone thing, the Gatwick drone. There was a bit of like, oh, maybe it was the Extinction Rebellion. They gave out a statement like, no, that is not what we do. We do, like when they did all the stopping of the bridges in London, they stop the road for 5 minutes, they get out of people's way. People need to go around about their business. Even when you do your WWF carbon footprint questionnaire, it counts your flights that you do not for work. If you have to fly in order to earn a living to feed your family, then we don't count that. What we're counting is your frivolous burning of carbon, filling the atmosphere with carbon.
How do you know when you're wrong?
It's probably your stomach feels a bit sick, maybe.
How do you know? Like, there's that moment, it's like, I might be wrong. And you go, no. And then something else has to probably happen to make it kind of flare up a little bit more. And you're like, Like, first you have to know that you're wrong before you can admit that you're wrong.
It's possibly not too dissimilar than when you are right about something bad. Here's my explanation for that statement. So, the idea of Brexit fills me with dread.
Yeah.
Dread to a point that makes me feel sad. Occasionally makes me wake up in the middle of the night. It makes me sit there and think. I get this sort of sinking feeling in my stomach of, I do live in, the world's top 5 richest economies or whatever it is. Surely they're not going to let us run out of food. And then this other voice in my head goes, but we don't grow enough food. And we're an island. Somebody's going to have to sail it in or fly it in. And we've got no international agreements for sea or air. And we've got no ability to process lorries. We've got no... Like, fuck, what if there's food shortages? What if there's food? Maybe I should start storing some food. Oh, and then I feel a bit sick. Oh, no, I must be, surely, no, I'm wrong. And then I feel sick again, and I feel a sort of sinking feeling. And then I go, yeah, but if, I lived in Yugoslavia and nobody thought there was going to be a war. Political observers, we all kind of I wasn't surprised in a sort of shock horror, but you still sit there going, no, surely not. No, we're civilized people. Why would we do that to ourselves? We're not like that anymore. We're surely better than that. And then there was a war, and lots of people killed each other and themselves. And it's just, it does happen.
Before the First World War, people believed, they were like, I think war is over. Right, there was a belief. People thought that they were at the end of all of the stuff, and it was the worst than it had ever been. So there's been this sort of like complacency, almost this belief that we've reached a pinnacle that we couldn't fall back from, and there is evidence in the past that that belief was false, and they had no idea of what industrialized slaughter looked like. And we're walking into something that we don't know what it's going to be. We're ignoring history. It's right to be afraid.
I think it is. And so I think by the same way that I can't persuade myself not to worry, there's the same technique that you use when you have this sinking feeling. I think for me personally, it's this sort of, it usually physically manifests in the form of a rash.
So the solution to this, to me, is I think if you've got a bit of practice, if you've never admitted you're wrong, the first one is going to be bloody impossible, right?
Yeah.
But I reckon after you've done a couple, you realise the world doesn't end. Yeah, how could you sort of put that into education? How could you put that into the education system, admitting that you're wrong? Because it's all really built around being right, isn't it? It's all built around
about passing tests. And
there's nothing about mistakes being forgivable. Like, I couldn't, like, the first time I didn't get 100% on a test, it was like I burst into tears in front of the class. Like, just because I didn't get all the ticks. I was like, what just happened? Like, I was not prepared for it. Like, you need some practice. You need some safe training.
Safe failures.
Yeah.
But then people talk about there's so much innovation literature. It's, fail fast, fail soon, fail early, fail. The best innovators have failed, la, la, la. But then we still don't, nobody looks at a CV and go, this person failed their degree, ace. Let's hire them. Let's see what they learned from this experience. But there is a sort of like, okay, that didn't work, that comes with experimenting, either science or engineering, where actually knowing what didn't work is a step forward, which makes it, I think, for me personally, to go, well, that didn't work.
It's a different thing to I was wrong. It's like I tried something and now I see that it's a failure. And you hold on to something for a while. You're like, oh, no, it was fine. And then you go, no, it didn't work, did it?
No.
And then it's a relief.
It is a relief.
Admitting you're wrong, because that's the thing, like, you're putting a lot of energy into, like, once something's false, like lying is a lot of energy. It's a lot of work to maintain a lie. I'm terrible at it because I just can't be bothered. If not, I'm too lazy to lie all the time. Like, some people build they construct a reality from lies. But that's a lot of energy in. I think maybe the sort of carrot on this sort of like admitting you're wrong, if you just admitted that you were wrong, you would have so much energy. You don't realise how much energy you're putting into this. So, give it a go.
But I think what you're saying in education, like giving people the opportunity to test assumptions, and even the word assumption, I'm assuming I'm right for now. It's like,
instead of
everyone goes, assumptions make us an ass out of you and me and all that. Assumptions are a very valid way to approach discovery. It's like, it's not wrong to have an assumption. It's wrong to have an untested, unvalidated assumption.
It's wrong to still defend the assumption after it's been objectively proven wrong. Thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, go to grandpodcast.com. There's a subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. Where can people find you, Ivanka?
At Ivanka on Twitter.
You can find me at michaelforestmusic.com. And I done made all of the songs on here. What else is there?
Writing us some reviews would be great on whatever you listen to it on.
Yeah.
Some stars, some reviews, some words, all of those things. Send us some feedback. hello@grandpodcast.com. If you want to join the competition that helps you measure how good you are in a given week, email us and we'll send you details for how to log in. I think we will find that I've won again this week.
Well, let's have we'll carry that, since we're doing a double record, we'll carry over that discussion for the next episode, because I don't know, I may have to give myself more points than I give myself, depending on the outcome of the discussion.
All right then.
But Happy New Year.
Oh yes, happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And try and admit to a mistake in January. New Year's resolution. I'm going to. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.